Sergei, worked as a taxi driver for half his life. And even though he's retired, he still occasionally works part-time. He loves his job, partly because it gives him the opportunity to interact with so many different people. He's got a whole bunch of stories. You could write a book. Some of them are really strange, hard to explain logically. I'll share one with you. Maybe someone can explain what he encountered. He was working the night shift that time. Around 2 o'clock, he picked up an order. He was happy because it's usually quiet around that time. He figured, well, I'll just give someone a ride home again. He pulled up to a 9-story building in the city center and saw someone pacing the entrance. Before he could stop, the man jumped in. He turned out to be his passenger. He sat next to the driver, although everyone usually occupied the back seat. The man immediately noticed that the passenger was extremely nervous. His hands were shaking, sweat was beading on his forehead. He quickly repeated the address, even though the order already stated the destination. He then added, "Hurry up, please. I'm in a hurry." He's got something, the man thought, his first thought, but apparently not, well, who knows? He didn't look like a night passenger at all. A rumpled raincoat, glasses, and a bald head glistening with sweat. Had he been running? He looked like a bank teller. Maybe he'd been held up at work. Well, if he's going to drive, then he'll drive. As the man was about to leave the yard, his attention was drawn to a strange pedestrian. He was wearing a dark hooded raincoat and holding something like a cane. He walked with a swagger, as if he owned the place, and my man was driving through it. This stranger crossed the street and headed straight for their car, but the passenger didn't notice the pedestrian right away. He was looking the other way. Then he turned his head and saw. And then he yelled, "Get going! Get going! Come on, don't stop, quickly!" My uncle says the passenger's voice was so desperate and frightened that he felt the hair on his head stand on end. Something so terrifying went through him, right down to the bone. Sergei stepped on the gas, fast enough to calm the strange client and to calm himself, and pulled out of the yard. The pedestrian was left far behind. They drove in silence. My uncle has a principle. Passengers remain silent, and he doesn't bother chatting either. The other one sat there, shaking like a leaf, and kept repeating his rosary beads. Then he heard a muttering, so quietly that the words couldn't be heard. He was muttering something like a prayer or some kind of incantation. Well, my uncle felt really uneasy. He glanced at the map, wondering if he could get there quickly and drop off the strange passenger. He stopped at a traffic light at the intersection. The streets were empty, but you never know. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Sergei noticed something. Turning his head, he was stunned. 20 meters away from the car, walking leisurely, just as leisurely, was the same pedestrian in the dark raincoat. This time, for some reason, Sergei felt so uneasy that he accelerated without waiting for the green light. The passenger also saw the pedestrian and started counting his beads even faster and muttering even louder. How did he get here? The man couldn't help himself. Even if he was driving, it's impossible. Do you know him? The passenger babbled something, but he seemed so agitated that not a word was understood. The man glanced at him and stopped asking questions, seeing his face. White, as if all the blood had drained, and his eyes like those of a hunted animal. The passenger glanced nervously back a few times and wiped the sweat from his forehead, then said in a pleading voice, "If possible, don't stop at the traffic lights, please." The man was usually a very principled driver, obeying all the rules, but this time he didn't even think of resisting. He accelerated, braking only for cameras. Fortunately, it was night. The highway was almost empty. Finally, he arrived at the address he'd given. It turned out to be some kind of administrative building, oddly enough. The windows weren't lit. Clearly, no one was there. What was he doing there? "Are you sure you're going this way?" the man asked, just in case. "Right here," the passenger stuttered. He opened the door, glanced around, then, without looking, shoved a large bill at Sergei and, without waiting for change, ran toward the building. Sergei was in no hurry to leave. Curiosity got the better of him, though, and he decided to watch for a bit. His passenger ran to the service entrance, looking around fearfully. He unlocked the door with a key and went inside. A minute passed, but no lights came on in any of the windows. "I'm going crazy," the man said to himself, and started the engine. He turned around, started to drive away, and suddenly he broke out in a sweat, his hair standing on end. A figure in a dark cloak appeared right in front of his car. It was the same pedestrian with the cane. But how? How had he covered the distance Sergei had driven at speed in 20 minutes? The man slammed on the brakes. For a brief moment, the headlights illuminated the stranger's face. Sergei saw his regular features, a satisfied grin, and his eyes. The pedestrian's eyes glowed red. No, not like an animal's, phosphorescent in the light. They glowed as if illuminated from within. My uncle, beside himself with fear, drove around him, turning onto the road. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the stranger, just as leisurely, tossing his cane from hand to hand, approach the building where the passenger had disappeared. And then, my uncle was overcome with utter terror. Yes, he'd been terrified before, but now his whole being screamed, "Get out of here, quickly!" And he did. He revved the car so hard he could barely control it. He didn't drive any more taxis that night. He went home, drank all the vodka he could find, and only then was he able to sleep. And the next morning, he heard news of a terrible fire that had destroyed warehouses and the adjacent administrative building. He had no doubt, but he still checked the address where it had happened. Yes, it was the very address where he'd taken his overnight passenger. He followed the news, wanting to find out the cause of the fire, even asking the locals, but no one ever found anything out. Someone was found to be responsible, and the matter was hushed up. Sergei still can't find an explanation for those events. It was the strangest story he'd ever encountered, and the most terrifying. Many years have passed since then, but remembering that night is still just as terrifying for him.